Hi everyone, this is Jerry. This is a game between Hikaru Nakamura and Maxim Dlugy. It was a speed chess game played for fun in 2006. It had bullet time controls to it. Both players had just a minute apiece to play the game. I'll just be giving a brief review of this game. I'm covering it because I think it's pretty interesting to see how much thought can actually be placed into a game with such little time attributed to it. A testament to the strength of both of these players can be seen if you were to throw this game on a computer and analyze it. You'd see that the first 20 moves of the game really had no one side with a considerable advantage. So hopefully you take something away from this. Hikaru opens with 1 e4, Max replies c6, the Caro-Kann, knight f3, d5, and now d3. Just to summarize it very quickly, says, I'm okay with the queens coming off the board, let's play a dead equal position where my king is going to be uncastled. Black goes for it. Takes, the queens come off. The white king loses its right to castle, which isn't a big deal. Can always find comfort by way of c3, king c2, where it's centrally located, which is where you kind of want your king to be as the endgame approaches. You may very well already consider this position here an endgame. So from here, what we have are both sides really just trying to get their minor pieces out and get their rooks connected. So from here, bishop g4 pins the knight to the king. Bishop to e2 defense, breaks the pin, gets a new piece involved. Knight to d7, continuing with development, and now knight on f to d2. What is this move doing? If you go by the principle of not moving the same piece more than once in the opening, why is such a move being played here? This knight is already developed. Why are you going here? Well, one reason for this move is to welcome this sort of exchange. If it does occur, white is essentially castled. You know, when you do castle, what actually occurs? Well, you get your king to safety and you're connecting your rooks. Well, white is now one step closer to having these rooks connected. As soon as these two pieces come out, that's the exact state that we would have. Also, this king from e2 is perfectly safe. It's off this open file and it's really not accessible to any checks by the opponent's knights or bishop. That could have been one reason. Another reason is to take into account that this bishop here is likely to turn out to be a bad bishop. What do I mean by that exactly? Instead of this move, let's just say c3 were played. Black is likely to be playing this pawn to e5 move. And if we look a little bit closer at the pawns in the center, both of them are fixed, which means neither can move. This pawn for white is on a light square. That implies that the light square bishop is going to be considered to be the bad bishop. Of these two, this guy here is considered to be the bad bishop. So it's worthwhile to exchange off this bishop for black's good bishop. This bishop, on the other hand, is considered bad since this pawn is fixed and on a dark square. It could potentially get in the way of this bishop, just like this pawn here could potentially get in the way of this bishop. So that could have been another reason why that move was played. But so what we do have is just knight on f to d2, and the bishops, sure enough, do get exchanged, and the king is going to be quite safe from here. So white has essentially castled artificially. From here, pawn to e5, just allowing the bishop to come out, and now c3. What is this move doing exactly? Well, you might think, why not come here with the knight, but you what are its long-term prospects from there? Where's it going next? What is it really doing from c3? Yeah, it's developing a piece, but can't really make use of either of these squares. It's almost like this pawn here boxes out this knight on c3. So this pawn to c3 move, what it's doing is controlling this square here. Actually, if we take a look at both of these squares, we'll see that the pawns that have been moved are both trying to compete for these highlighted squares. Neither side wants to allow, for example, a knight to land on either of these squares, so c3 is taking that into account. From here, knight on g to f6, just getting a new piece out, pressure on e4. This f3 move is made almost instantaneously, just freeing up this knight. You really don't want to tie your own pieces down to the defense of your pawns, so it's just a role reversal here. Let's have my pawns protect my pawns and let my pieces do other things. Bishop to c5, knight c4 allows this bishop to come out. King to e7, so notice that black is opting to not castle. You want your king close to the center of the board since this is an endgame phase now. Bishop g5, development pins the knight to the king. b5 just puts a question to this knight right away. Knight e3 has thoughts of coming to this f5 square. h6 puts a question to the bishop, and white throws in a check first, which chases the king back to f8. Since this pawn was being threatened, king here would be no good. The knight can take with check, and only then you could be reacting to the threat on your bishop. So just the king has to unfortunately just go back to f8 for the time being. Bishop back to h4. g6, finally the knight gets kicked back to e3, and black just snaps off the knight. I think it's just really to allow for this knight to potentially make use of this square and maybe even come here and put pressure on these two pawns. That really doesn't come about in this game, but again, this is a bullet game, so really not a bad idea to just maybe simplify the position. So king to e7 walks into a pin, but really the ideal square is going to be to place itself on e6, a light square opposite the remaining dark squared bishop. From here, knight d2, king e6, and now knight to b3, looking to maybe get to a5 and put pressure on the c6 pawn. Black stops that immediately with a5, taking that square away from the knight. And after pawn to a4, we have rook on h to b8, and right here white starts to go a little bit astray. We have pawn takes pawn, and now rook takes pawn, so this knight is hit, and if it moves, this pawn will fall. From here, rook to a3, just defense of the knight, and now pawn to a4, just trying to make this knight move right now. This isn't the best move in this position, actually. Up to this point, or actually up to about this point here, both sides again have played a fairly equal game, you know, neither side with considerable advantage. But from here, there's some mistakes coming about. Takes, the rook recaptures, and after rook to a3, a strong move for black would be knight to b6, just looking to come here and, you know, fork the king and the rook. Eventually, this pawn could come forward and put a question to this knight. This was just overlooked by black, and, you know, that's going to happen in a bullet game. These are just more played for fun, but it's pretty neat to see how good a moves can be played despite the short time control. So after a4, we just have neither side, or white just isn't reacting to the threat on the knight, but instead just puts an immediate pin on this rook here. Black gets off that file with rook on a to b8, and now the knight reacts finally to the threat. Rook takes pawn, rook takes a, and now rook to c2. Notice that, yeah, this pawn is being attacked. White is not going to be, you know, strictly defensive with a move like this. You want to have active defense, so that's why we're seeing a move like just rook c4, defense of the pawn, but also an attack on this c6 pawn. Rook b6, similarly, you know, why not this? Well, this is just strictly defensive. This would be considered to be active defense. Yes, it's still functioning along this file, but it's also serving a duty of watching over this pawn here. So king to d3, attacks this rook. The rook moves away to b2. This is another thing. As the endgame approaches, you know, you don't want your pieces to have to watch over your pawns. If you're really going to want your king to be responsible for watching over any pawns. Hopefully the pawns that your king does have to watch over are ones that are centrally located, because that's where your king would like to be placed ideally. From here, rook to a7, a very strong move in almost all games, just placing the rook on the 7th rank. There's possibilities for maybe grabbing this pawn at some point. Pawn to g5, hitting the bishop. Bishop to f2 hits this rook, and after rook here, this game is just pretty much over. Really the only chance is to maybe make a move like this, but I think that white is the better side here as a result of this knight really not being able to do a whole lot. This pawn structure pretty much boxes it out, and this bishop is, you know, has many pieces in its view. This is an active rook, and this knight could potentially come to this c4 square at some point. Black doesn't do this, just overlooks this pawn being grabbed. So after this rook to b7 move, it's just pretty much downhill from here. Rook takes pawn with check, king here to e7. The rooks get doubled along this 6th rank, really constraining, or really not allowing this knight to move, because this knight would then be captured. Knight to h5, trying to make use of f4, but after that square is taken away, this knight just finds itself out of play, and black is in rough shape. After this knight to f8 move, we see bishop check, king to e7, just trying to defend the knight, and now rook on c6 to c8. Checks the king, king to d7, and now rook takes knight, and that's the ball game. So that's all for this video. I hope you're able to take something away from it, even though it was just a bullet game. Take care.